This is why this text is joined today in our reading to the baptism of Jesus. Jesus is baptized by John in the Jordan River. He passes through the waters, and then John talks about how Jesus will baptize by the Holy Spirit and fire. All this recalls the words of Isaiah. Now, I like to tell people who are about to get baptized to imagine the worst when they're about to go under the water. Especially with children. I know, bad pastor, but I ask the children, so if when I put you under the water, if I held you under there for a really long time and didn't let you up, what would happen? And their eyes get big as saucers, you know. And then they say, well, I would drown. And I say, exactly. You know, that's what I want you to imagine. Because then, when I bring you up out of the waters and you breathe again, then you will know that God has saved you. You know the waters have not overwhelmed you. You have passed through the waters, and God has been with you. Now you have nothing to fear the rest of your life, and even at the time of death, because you belong to God. In the final weeks of his life, Gene Greer, who was a dedicated Baptist servant and a member of our church, was dying of pancreatic cancer. The doctors came to him and told him that the treatments weren't working and that there wasn't anything they could do, that he needed to prepare to die. And he told the doctors not to worry about that. He was prepared to die already because he said, look, the worst thing that can happen to me is not the worst thing that can happen to me. Even death doesn't have the last word over me. I belong to God. Our baptism is a reminder that we don't need to be afraid of anything because we've already passed through the waters. We've already walked through the fire. Baptism is rehearsal for death. When the time comes, we need not fear because we've already practiced in the baptistry or remembered it here as we did today. But it's also true that baptism isn't a one-time event of passing through the waters. It is an ongoing experience, which is to say that being chosen by God, being part of Israel's story in the world, requires that we continue to pass through waters and walk through fire. Now, as some of you know, I grew up north in New York. Have I told you that enough times over the years? We have different language for things up there. I don't know if you knew. But one of them is a kind of highway that we call a throughway, right? A throughway is a high-speed road with few entrances and exits. You get the feeling that once you're on it for good, right? And if you look to get off it, you got a long wait for the next exit from the highway. And this is part of what we learn in the Christian life. Once you begin this journey, you can expect that there's no way off it. There's no way around it, and there's no turning back from it. It's always and only a through way. Israel passed through the waters and fire in Egypt, and then they had to do so again in Babylon, and that wouldn't be the last time either. And I do not know, I can't imagine why it is that Jews have had to suffer as they have throughout the ages. I suspect it has more to do with the world's wickedness than anything God designed for them. But if we want to claim to be part of Israel's story now too, through Jesus, we must give up the idea that we deserve any other way in the world around suffering. This is one of the great heresies of the church that we see in Christian nationalism here in America and in countries around the world. It's the idea that somehow chosenness means privilege more than sacrifice, blessing without suffering, honor without duty. If we want to read ourselves into this text, we must be willing to trust that God is with us through the waters and through the fire and in no other way.